On July 26, 2026, the Pentagon released a statement describing American military posture in the Middle East as, quote, fully dominant and without peer. Hold on to that, because within 48 hours of that statement, 3 separate American carrier strike group commanders quietly requested updated threat assessments for the Strait of Hormuz. Not because something had changed in Washington's favor, because something had changed in Tehran's. These two things cannot both be true. A military without peer does not quietly reassess its own vulnerabilities in a waterway it has patrolled for 40 years. And today, what gets revealed is which one of those things reflects reality and which one is a shadow on the cave wall. Right now, CNN is asking whether Iran is bluffing. Fox News is asking whether the president should strike first. The BBC is running a segment on Iranian domestic politics and whether the supreme leader is losing control of the Revolutionary Guard. That is the wrong conversation. All of it. Because every one of those questions assumes that Iran is reacting to American pressure. That Tehran is on the back foot, improvising, desperate. That is precisely what Iran wants every anchor, every think tank fellow, every retired general on a cable panel to believe. The right question, the only question that matters this week, is this: when did Iran stop reacting to American strategy and start mirroring it? In the next 20 minutes, what gets laid out is the answer. And the answer will restructure how you understand every headline coming out of the Gulf for the rest of this year. Okay, there is a framework for what Iran has done. It does not have a common name in Western policy circles, which is exactly why it has worked so well. Call it the asymmetric mirror. The concept is straightforward. When a weaker power faces a dominant adversary, the instinctive response, the response every Western strategist expects, is to find the asymmetry. Attack the aircraft carrier with a swarm of cheap drones. Use irregular forces where conventional armies would fail. Strike the supply line, not the front line. That is asymmetric warfare, and America has spent 50 years preparing its adversaries for precisely that response by demonstrating over and over that it is the one the United States knows how to defeat. The Pentagon war-gamed asymmetric challenges. It built doctrine around them. It published manuals. It ran exercises. The entire military-industrial apparatus of the most powerful nation in human history was configured at enormous expense to defeat the asymmetric adversary. So Iran did something that broke the model entirely. It studied American strategy from the outside. It read the manuals. It watched the exercises, and then it built, not a mirror image of American strategic logic. The asymmetric mirror is not about matching capability. It is about matching the thinking, copying the doctrine, and deploying it at a fraction of the cost, in a geography where that fraction is enough. Think about what the United States actually does when it projects power. First, it establishes layered air defense, systems that can intercept threats at multiple ranges, from theater ballistic missiles down to cruise missiles down to drones, all networked together. Second, it uses standoff precision strike to degrade an adversary's command and control before committing ground or naval forces. Third, it controls the logistical choke point, the narrow passage of water or air through which an adversary's resources must flow, and threatens to cut it. Fourth, it prepositions assets in allied territory close to the target, shortening strike packages and reducing exposure. And fifth, it uses the credible threat of escalation dominance to deter the adversary from retaliating against those forward assets. 5 steps. That is the American playbook as it has been executed from the Gulf War to the opening weeks of every engagement since. Write them down if you want, because what comes next will show you each one of them reflected back, altered just enough to cost a fraction of the original, deployed in a geography that makes the American version substantially more fragile. The historical anchor for this is not a military one. It is a chess one, and it goes back to 1997 to a match that most people remember wrongly. In May of 1997, Deep Blue, the IBM supercomputer, defeated Garry Kasparov in a 6-game match. The story that got told afterward was a story about raw computational power. The machine could calculate faster, see further, process more. But chess historians who have gone back through the match record have noted something more unsettling. Deep Blue did not beat Kasparov by being more powerful than Kasparov. It beat him by understanding Kasparov's own style of play so precisely that it was able to exploit Kasparov's strategic instincts. Against him, the machine had been trained on Kasparov's previous games. It knew which positions Kasparov would instinctively favor, and it steered the board toward exactly those positions, and then broke the rules Kasparov expected to apply. Iran has been studying America's games for 30 years. Okay? Does that make sense? Let that sit for a moment. Now the evidence. There are 5 documented developments. 5, not 2, not 3. 5 that together constitute the asymmetric mirror in operational practice. Each one corresponds to a step in the American playbook. Each one was deployed at a cost ratio that should alarm every budget analyst in the Defense Department. Let's go through them. Number 1. Iran's layered air defense network is now, by every credible independent assessment, the most complex in the Middle East, outside of Israel. And here is what makes that remarkable. The United States spent approximately $14 billion across 2 decades constructing its integrated air defense posture in the region. Patriot batteries, THAAD installations, forward-positioned Aegis destroyers. 14 billion. The figure most commonly cited by analysts who have studied Iranian procurement, from the International Institute for Strategic Studies, from CSIS, from researchers who track Iranian defense spending independently, is that Iran assembled its layered ground-based air defense architecture for somewhere between $1 and $2 billion. Not 14 billion, 1 to 2 billion. They achieved this by reverse engineering captured American and Israeli systems, acquiring Russian S-300 components, and then domestically producing derivative variants, and by distributing the system across 31 provinces in a command architecture that has no single switchable node. Remember the mosaic defense, 31 provinces, decentralized command, no single point of failure that can be struck to collapse the whole network. You cannot bomb the nervous system of a network that has 31 nervous systems. Okay? Number 2, standoff, precision strike. The American doctrine says, reach out and destroy command and control before the adversary can respond. Iran has built a precision missile and drone arsenal that now numbers, and this figure comes from U.S. Central Command's own public threat testimony to Congress in 2024, before the committee record, not from Iranian state media, over 3,000 ballistic and cruise missiles, and an estimated 3,000 to 5,000 armed drones of varying range and precision. 3,000 missiles, the key development, and this is the one the cable panels are missing completely, is not the quantity. It is the recent introduction of domestically produced guidance packages that have improved circular error probable on Iran's medium-range ballistic missiles from roughly 500 meters to under 50 meters. 50 meters, not 500, 50. That is not a weapon designed to terrorize a population. That is a weapon designed to hit a building, a specific building. A command center, a communications relay, a runway, a fuel depot. Iran has built at a cost the Pentagon estimates at roughly 8% of what an equivalent American precision strike capability would cost. A force that can do what American standoff strike does. Reach out and specifically destroy the infrastructure that keeps a military functioning. Does that make sense? That is the second mirror. Number 3. The choke point, 20% of the world's seaborne oil transits the Strait of Hormuz. 20%. That figure has been cited so many times in so many geopolitical discussions that it has lost its emotional weight. So let's reconstruct it. The global economy consumes approximately 100 million barrels of oil per day. 20 million of those barrels every single day pass through a waterway that at its narrowest point is 33 kilometers wide. 33 kilometers. American strategy in the Gulf has always been predicated on controlling that choke point, not closing it, controlling it. The implicit message to every regional actor has been, we can close this if we choose to, and you cannot stop us from closing it, and therefore you will negotiate with us rather than confront us. Iran has spent 2 decades mining technology, submarine capability, anti-ship missile batteries, and fast attack boat tactics specifically designed to make that logic run in reverse. The message Iran now sends, in the Pentagon's own classified assessments, portions of which have been reported by Reuters, by the Financial Times, and by Defense One based on congressional briefings, is that Iran cannot close the strait in a sustained way, but it can make the closure cost the United States more than the United States is willing to pay to reopen it. That is not the same thing as matching American power. It is mirroring American deterrence logic. If you close this, I can make reopening it catastrophic. That is the choke point flipped. The third mirror, number 4, forward positioning. American doctrine prepositions assets close to the adversary. Bases in Qatar, in Bahrain, in the UAE, in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia. The logic is shorter flight times, faster response, sustainable sortie rates. Iran looked at that logic and applied it to a completely different kind of asset. Iran does not have allied governments that host its military bases in the conventional sense. What Iran has instead, and this is documented extensively by the UN panel of experts reports, by Israeli military intelligence assessments that have been cited in the Israeli press, and by American intelligence assessments declassified in summary, is a network of pre-positioned weapons depots, trained proxy forces, and precision-guided munition stockpiles distributed across Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. Forward positioning without forward bases, the weapons are already in place, the personnel are already trained, the strike packages are already assembled. When Iran needs to project force in the direction of Israel or American regional assets, it does not need to fly anything from Bandar Abbas. It reaches into a pre-positioned network that took 2 decades and an estimated $4 to $8 billion to build. Compare that to the American forward basing costs in the region, the figure most commonly cited from the Stimson Center and from RAND's analyses of overseas basing costs is well over $200 billion across the post-2001 period. 4 to 8 billion versus 200 billion for a capability that in the key scenario performs a comparable deterrent function. That is the fourth mirror. Number 5, escalation dominance. This is the most subtle and it is the most important. American military doctrine has always relied on what strategists call escalation dominance, the credible ability to raise the cost of any conflict faster than the adversary can bear, to the point where the adversary's rational choice is to stop. You push, America pushes harder. You escalate, America escalates further. The threat of that dynamic is what deters the initial push. Iran has spent the last decade constructing what can only be described as a distributed cost imposition network specifically calibrated to attack the domestic political tolerance for escalation inside the United States, rather than its military capacity. The $50,000 drone that forces a $4 million Patriot intercept, that asymmetry, that cost ratio, 50,000 against 4 million, does not win a war. But it does something more insidious. It makes sustaining the war politically toxic at home. Every Patriot missile fired is a talking point. Every tanker hit in the Gulf is a gas price headline. Iran is not trying to defeat America militarily. It is trying to make the American public unwilling to sustain the cost of the conflict long enough for American military capacity to matter. That is the fifth mirror, and it is the most direct copy of something the United States itself pioneered: the use of economic and political cost imposition to erode an adversary's will rather than destroy its capability. America called it sanctions. Iran has turned the logic around and is running it back. This is the single most important thing to understand in this entire video. Now let me give you the strongest case against everything just presented, because intellectual honesty requires it. The strongest opposing argument goes like this: Iran's military posture is a paper tiger dressed in strategic clothing. The drone swarms were degraded significantly by the joint American-Israeli-Jordanian interception operation in April 2024. The precision missile upgrades are real, but unproven in a contested environment against a peer-level air defense network. The proxy network in Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen has been systematically degraded. Hamas in Gaza has been devastated. Hezbollah suffered severe command decapitation. The Houthi targeting record against naval vessels is real but sporadic. And most critically, Iran's economy is under sanctions-driven pressure that makes sustaining any of this capital-intensive military development increasingly difficult. The whole asymmetric mirror framework, the argument goes, is an elegant theory that describes a capability Iran aspires to rather than one it currently possesses. That is a serious argument. It deserves serious engagement. But here is what it cannot explain. It cannot explain why 3 American carrier strike group commanders requested updated Hormuz threat assessments in the last 72 hours. It cannot explain why the most recent NATO review of Middle Eastern contingency planning, portions of which were reported by Political Europe in June 2026, identified Iranian anti-access and area denial capability as the primary constraint on American operational planning in the region. Not Iranian nuclear development, not Iranian proxy forces, but the anti-access network itself. And it cannot explain the cost arithmetic. Even if every degradation the opposing argument describes is accurate, even if we accept that the April 2024 interception significantly reduced Iran's drone inventory, that the proxy network is weaker than it was in 2023, that the economy is under strain, Iran rebuilt its drone stockpile by most independent estimates within 8 months. 8 months, not 3 years, 8 months, at a per unit cost that makes attrition a losing proposition for the intercepting side. The opposing argument describes a capability that has been damaged. It does not describe a capability that has been neutralized. And a damaged asymmetric mirror still reflects. Pull the threads together. The asymmetric mirror is not a single weapon, not a single tactic. It is a strategic orientation, a decision made at some point in the last 2 decades inside Iranian defense planning to stop trying to match American capability and instead mirror American strategic logic at a cost ratio that inverts the burden. Layered air defense built for 1/7 the cost. Precision strike capacity assembled for a fraction of what CENTCOM spends on equivalent capability. Choke point leverage that runs the American deterrence argument in reverse. Forward positioning achieved without forward bases. And a cost and position campaign calibrated not to win the war but to exhaust the political will to fight it. 5 mirrors. 5 copies of the American playbook reflected back at a cost structure that makes the original unsustainable against the copy. The United States is not losing this confrontation, but it is discovering in real time that the playbook it wrote, the playbook it has run in this region for 4 decades, has been read, studied, and partially reproduced by the adversary it was written to deter. The Pentagon's statement about dominance without peer was not a lie. It was something more dangerous. It was a truth that has stopped being the whole truth. But now comes the question nobody in Washington or Brussels or Riyadh is asking loudly enough. Who is the real winner of a protracted, expensive, politically exhausting American confrontation with Iran in the Gulf? Not Israel. A sustained Gulf conflict is an economic and security catastrophe for Israel, regardless of how it ends. Not Saudi Arabia. The kingdom's entire Vision 2030 project depends on stable oil revenues and stable shipping lanes. Not Iran. Even a successful deterrence posture is not a prosperous country. The winner, the one not firing a shot, the one reading the board and collecting the winnings while everyone else argues over who controls which sea lane, is Beijing. China imports approximately 40% of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. A disrupted strait is genuinely bad for China in the short term, but a United States bogged down in a Gulf confrontation, militarily stretched, politically divided, economically strained by the cost of sustaining forward presence against an adversary that has mirrored its own deterrence logic, is a United States that is not pivoting to the Pacific. Every month of American strategic attention consumed by Hormuz is a month of reduced American strategic capacity in the South China Sea, in the Taiwan Strait, and the Korean Peninsula. China does not need to help Iran. It does not need to provide weapons or intelligence or diplomatic cover. It simply needs to wait. The patient giant reads the board. The patient giant is not playing this game. The patient giant is playing the next one. 3 things to watch in the next 48 to 72 hours. 1. Watch whether the American carrier strike groups currently in the region visibly reposition. If even one carrier moves further from the strait, increases its standoff distance, that is a visible acknowledgement of the threat assessment request and a confirmation that the asymmetric mirror framework is being taken seriously at the operational level by CENTCOM commanders, whatever the public statements say. 2. Watch Iranian state media's coverage of the American statement about dominance. If Iranian state media highlights a statement prominently and pairs it with imagery of their own missile systems, if they clip it, amplify it, run it next to footage of their own exercises, that is a deliberate mirror operation, reflecting the American claim back at the American audience as a provocation designed to generate political pressure. 3. Watch the oil price. Not the headline crude figure, but the Brent WTI spread and the insurance premium index for Gulf tanker shipping. Those 2 numbers move on threat perception before any military development becomes public. If the spread widens and insurance premiums spike in the next 72 hours, the market is pricing in something that has not yet appeared in any public reporting. The market is often the first honest narrator in a conflict zone. Your homework is this. Find two documents and put them side by side. The first is the unclassified summary of the 2024 CENTCOM posture statement to the Senate Armed Services Committee. It is publicly available on the committee's website. The second is a 2019 RAND Corporation report titled Extending Russia, which is not about Russia at all in the relevant section. It is about the cost imposition logic of prolonged adversarial competition. Read the CENTCOM statement about what Iran's military capabilities represent as a challenge. Then read the RAND framework for how cost imposition works as a strategic tool. Put those two documents side by side. If you do not come away thinking that Iran has been running the RAND playbook against the United States for at least a decade, if you can find a hole in that argument, prove it wrong in the comments. Do not tell me you disagree. Show me where the logic breaks. I genuinely want that challenge. The analysis from this community is consistently sharper than anything produced in isolation, and the most important counterargument is probably one that has not been written in the script. Here is the question to sit with. If the most powerful military in human history spent 4 decades writing a strategic playbook, and a sanctioned, economically constrained regional power spent those same 4 decades reading that playbook and building a discounted copy of it, who exactly wrote the strategy that is now constraining American options in the Gulf? I'll see you in the next one.